Welcome to another Classic Movie Monday, and today I thought it would be interesting to dive into something that is a little bit more on the foreign side, but I think has held a lot of significance over the years um, within American culture, in particular people who are very familiar with Japanese animation, which I think has been, relatively speaking, growing in popularity as far as within the United States. Particular film that I'm going to be discussing did not initially get so much of an American audience as it did a Japanese audience, because it is and still remains to be one of the highest grossing films for Japan. But it didn't gravitate to American audiences until a while later. And then I think a lot of people seem to categorize this film in particular as being Miyazaki's, who is the director of this film. It's considered, this film is considered to be, I guess, his sort of standout, which I can kind of see why, because usually I think Japanese animation is known for being a little bit on the bizarre side and unusual, and touching on maybe some interesting topics that usually isn't discussed in a lot of other animated films. So I figured, why not discuss Spirited Away? um, so basically, this film, although it did not initially receive that much of a following within the United States, it did gain significant popularity over time, and I think a lot of critics in particular seem to really gravitate towards this film for some reason. I think they just really like the idea that this film was very bizarre, because it is. But again, I think there is some uniqueness into the way it displays its creativity. Because the animation is really well done, and the music actually, I think, is really well executed, and the characters in the story are interesting. But there are some things that I think are just a little bit too on the strange side for my taste. And I think this is what has drawn me away from really enjoying Japanese animation, because a lot of it is very bizarre and a lot of it doesn't really make sense to me personally. And I don't really gravitate to a lot of the strange oddities that this film in particular tries to showcase. But I think when it showcases something that is unique or interesting, then I find it entertaining and engaging to watch. But again, I just think it's just one of those things where personally I feel like some of the creative steps that they take are interesting, and then other times I just find them to be kind of just too strange and too out there for my taste, and I just zone out, and I don't particularly find those moments all that enjoyable. In fact, I find them very uncomfortable and just kind of don't know what to feel about them. But I think what really does stand out within this entire film is its story, because its story is interesting, because we usually don't see this kind of a story take place within an animated film. Um, Even though we have seen maybe similar takes to it, this one tries to take it and kind of sort of twist itself on its head, so to speak. So we have the main character here named Chihiro, who is a young girl who is traveling with her parents to another home where they're going to be living. And then they end up stumbling upon this other world somehow. And you will discover how if you choose to watch the film. And basically, the interesting thing that I find about this film is how kind of rude the parents are. I mean, these parents, I could probably put them on the checklist of probably some of the most childish and strange parents that I've ever come across. I mean, they do not take any precautions. They are like kids almost. Like, Chiro is more of an adult than her parents. So it's kind of hard to take this film seriously when you have parents that act like this. I don't know if they were just trying to say something that, kids can have a brain too, which obviously kids do, but on this kind of extreme level that the film takes it, on the one hand, I understand what they're getting at, but on the one hand, it kind of actually rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. That you're showcasing these really stupid parents who are kind of rude to their kid. I mean, they're really not as grateful to Chihiro, and they don't really treat her all that well. Um, so I really don't think that the film did a really good job of showcasing parents or parenting, which I don't know if that was the film's intentions, to make parents seem like idiots and kids seem like sheer geniuses. But that's kind of how it sets itself up, because ultimately her parents get captured. And you will see how if you choose to watch the film. And it is pretty bizarre. Trust me, it's just weird and kind of uncomfortable and just a little strange. Like, it's almost laughably strange, you know? I mean, just saying the plot out loud, what happens, I mean, it already makes me go, really, really, that this is the best. Okay, I guess this is the best out of Japanese animation. Okay. So, and again, I'm not trying to say that this film is bad in any way, shape, or form, but again, the things that they take within this film did kind of rub me a little bit the wrong way at times. I mean, I thought that, just dumbing down the parents, didn't really provide anything interesting. But basically, the entire focus of this film, and what they do keep the focus on within this film really well, is Chihiro's character, because she ultimately has to be the one to save her parents. And basically, this strange world has very bizarre rules that they kind of don't really explain all too well within this film. They kind of try to make it seem very obscure. I almost think you would have to know a little bit about Japanese culture and history to kind of understand the certain significance that things have. Because I know that their culture is largely based within, um, ancestry and spirits and things like that, which provides some, interesting kind of looks into that kind of a culture. But at the same time, there are just parts that are just too bizarre, and again, I don't even reflect it. I don't think even reflect anything onto really the Japanese culture anyway. So yeah, there's just some things that this film takes that are just way too bizarre for me, and they really don't, I think, flow all too well. But really, what does make this film stand out, and I will say that the thing that makes this film stand out, is the fact that we have um, this girl named Chiro, who is a very identifiable character, going through this kind of a scenario where she has to be the one to step up and basically kind of be the adult, which she really was initially to begin with. Um, so she kind of has to go through and basically ultimately save her parents and experience all of the odysseys in order to go do that task. And it is very strange. Just again, be prepared for really weird stuff happening within this film. Um, but but uh but this again, despite its strangeness, I still think that this film does a good job of enhancing emotions, and I was genuinely interested throughout the film. Like, I liked to see where it was going. Like, that's I think usually something that sometimes animated films have a difficult time doing, um, because sometimes, they kind of insert padding. But I think this film does have a little bit of padding in it too, like any other animated film. But I liked how this film, you kind of didn't really know where it was ultimately going or where it was heading. So I think that unpredictability factor was, I think, something that maybe drew a lot of people in, and I think was what made this film rather unique from probably a lot of other animated projects. Um, and I'm sure there's a lot of interesting themes, and there's some symbolism I think you can tell too with various characters that Chihiro comes across. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think as far as a Japanese animated film, I can understand why it is a classic to their standards, and I can understand too why some critics, especially those who really enjoy Japanese animation, would consider this to be a classic. And I will hold it to that standard because what I think it does really well does really, really well. The whole plot, the unpredictability factor, the fact that we have Chiro, who's a fairly likable character, even though I think the voice that they picked for her in English, at least the one that I listened to, was a little bit too squeaky, and um, not as a more grounded voice. But overall, that's what's enjoyable for me. But from a more personal standpoint, what I didn't enjoy is I didn't like the fact that they dumbed down her parents just for the sake of, making her be the ultra perfect hero. I kind of didn't like that angle. And I didn't like the fact that there was all of these strange, bizarre things that were kind of thrown in my face, and I had no clue what they really meant, or I didn't really understand like why things needed to be a certain way. I just felt like that there was just a lot of bizarre things within this film that I think people like to think, oh, it's art because I made something strange. But to me, it's more of how you execute the strangeness that ultimately is what makes it work. And for me personally, there were some points where I was going, this is just too weird for me. Like, I can't identify with this at all. I just wanted to go back to the plot for the most part. I didn't want to be bombarded with this really strange imagery. Um, so yeah, I think that was just something that did not suit me as an audience member. But again, obviously the plot, the main character, the whole way in which the animation is structured is ultimately what makes it the classic that it is considered to be today. That is why it is on this level. I understand that. But there is such a thing as taste. And personally, the taste that Japanese entertainment, in particular Japanese animation, provides, at least for me personally, I don't really gravitate towards. I've never really been a huge fan of anime. I mean, I've read a little bit, but some of it just gets too bizarre, and I'm not from that culture. Like, I'm not Japanese, so I don't get certain things that they address that's, I guess, supposed to either be funny or quirky or bizarre. Um, I never understood why they would make the eyes so unbelievably big. Like, I mean, already within Western animation, the eyes are big, but Japanese eyes are like, the animation. So yeah, I mean, as far and the thing is too is I'm really big on more of animation details, and you know, I just feel like Western animation just flows a lot better than Japanese animation. I mean, this animation is good. I mean, this is good Miyazaki animation. It's just the way the faces are structured and just the way that everything flows. I mean, sometimes it works and other times I'm just kind of like, it's just not as well constructed in my opinion as And then sometimes the way they make people walk, like they make people walk like little run like this. It just looks so bizarre to me. You know, just the thing, just the techniques. I don't think are as strong or flow as well as something within Western animation. It's not to say that Japanese animation is bad at all. It's just not, I'm just not a huge fan of it. And I tried to not go in with that bias watching this film. Like, I took this film and went, okay, let me watch it. And when I watched it, I just thought, okay, this is way too bizarre. Like, personally, if you were to ask me if I were to favor to watch Kiki's Delivery Service over this film, I would actually prefer to watch Kiki's Delivery Service. You know why? Because it's grounded. It's not this huge, bizarre, artsy thing, you know, that tries to say something. You know, it's just this simple film, straightforward. I know the characters, I know the story, I know the sorts of things that they're going to sort of present. But at the same time, there is a certain amount of unpredictability too within that film as well. So, I mean, I think it really just all depends on taste, largely. And this kind of Japanese high art is just not my taste. But I will say, for what it does extremely well, I think it does extremely well, and that's why it is put on this in this category. It's just, you know, it is just a taste factor. I mean, I just don't feel it as much. I don't gravitate towards it as much. Um, I just prefer things that are maybe a little more straightforward with a little bit of symbolism. I don't mind going weird. Heck, I liked the pink elephants on parade in Dumbo, but the weirdness sort of had an explanation, and it was, you know, it had some significance even to the story you could make an argument for. And I'm not saying that strangeness within this film doesn't have any purpose either. It's just, there's just points where I just think it goes on to being too bizarre. And, you know, I don't think really adds too much weight to the story. So yeah, for me personally, I just think that it's really a taste factor, and um, for what this film does really good, it does really good, and that's why it's in this category. But there are some things that did really bother me, like I've mentioned earlier. But again, I sort of take the good from the bad from what I get out of this film. And overall, I think it was a positive experience. It just it just has these things in it that I just go, no, not my taste. But yeah, that's ultimately all I can say about this film. If you are not a fan at all of Japanese animation, I can't say that you'll probably enjoy this film at all. Um, you know, because it is heavily visually based. I mean, the dialogue's there obviously throughout, but it is very visual. So if you um, do not like that kind of style, and you do not like the kinds of, you know, I mean, I think they do have kind of similar messages with that throughout a lot of, I guess, Miyazaki films, you could argue. Um, and you know, this film just takes it into a very artsy style. And I think, you know, it's, if you really enjoy Japanese animation, you enjoy the high art, you enjoy the artistry significantly, then I think, you know, you will enjoy this film a lot more than I did. Again, I think it really depends on if you like the animation style and if you like this bizarre, weird tone and imagery that they like to throw at you. That maybe has some meaning, but you know, you don't really see it initially. And I know it's trying to be smart, which it is, and it is a smart film. I'm not saying this is a dumb film by any stretch of the imagination, but there are just some things like, you know, again, like I said before, the parents being sort of dumbed down as these buffoons. Um, you know, having Chihiro, even though she's a very good character and seems well-rounded, I think, you know, just having her be the whole savior is not something that, is something that we've seen before in storylines time and time again. So I think really ultimately where this film works really well is the fact that it is unpredictable, and by the fact that we have a character like Chihiro going through this. And I like too that they don't make her this very, they don't make her this very tough skinned character. They just make her intelligent, but she still has a lot of, I think, feminine qualities to her as well. And there are points where she does get scared and she does act like a kid. She's not like, this perfect hero. So I did like the fact that they did do that with her character as opposed to, somebody like Katniss who has one expression throughout the entire film, and just as who just represents a symbol of rebellion, whereas Chihiro, there's much more to her, I feel, than that. So that's what I think really worked to this film's advantage. But just again, it's the whole turns that this movie takes. I just think are sometimes a little bit too strange for me. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this film. But if, again, there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.